I was 34 years old in the fall of 2021 when I decided to spend a week alone in a cabin in the mountains of northern Maine. Life had been wearing me down hard. I had a messy breakup 6 months earlier. My job in a small construction company felt like it was going nowhere, and even my weekends were just endless loops of errands and TV. I needed a real break, something deeper than just lying on the couch for 2 days. I wanted silence, fresh air, and space to think. I found the cabin through an old coworker who had stayed there the previous winter. It was deep in the woods, about 2 hours north of Bangor. A guy named Carl rented it out cheap because it was so isolated. No cell service, no Wi-Fi, no cable. Just a wood stove, a well for water, and a solar panel for a few small lights if you needed them. It sounded perfect to me. I packed up my old Ford Escape with everything I thought I might need. A week's worth of canned food, bottled water, a heavy sleeping bag, extra boots, thick clothes, a few paperbacks, a flashlight with fresh batteries, and a shotgun my dad had left me, just in case. Maine wasn't exactly crawling with bears or anything, but being out there all alone made me feel better having it nearby. The drive up was long and slow, especially once I got off the main roads. The last 40 minutes were on a dirt road barely wide enough for one car, full of potholes and lined thick with trees that blotted out most of the daylight even at noon. When I finally reached the cabin, it was late afternoon. It sat in a small clearing surrounded by endless forest, a single-story building made of rough logs, with a stone chimney and a tiny covered porch. No other houses or cabins anywhere in sight. There was a small shed off to one side, probably for tools or firewood, and an old metal pump sticking out of the ground near the porch. I turned off the car, grabbed my bag, and just stood there for a few minutes, soaking in the quiet. No cars, no voices, not even a plane overhead. Just the rustle of wind through the trees and the occasional caw of a crow. The inside of the cabin was basic but clean. One main room with a cot, a battered wooden table, 2 chairs, a cast iron stove in the corner, and a small kitchenette with a hand pump for water. No fridge, just a big cooler if you brought ice. There was a small bathroom attached with an old composting toilet. Everything smelled faintly of wood smoke and pine, and dust floated in the sunlight coming through the little windows. I settled in that first night without much trouble. I made myself a simple dinner of beef stew out of a can, ate it straight from the pot, and then sat on the porch with a beer until it got too dark to see. The stars overhead were incredible, sharper, and more plentiful than I'd ever seen back in the city. I watched them for a long time, then crawled into the cot inside and fell asleep without much effort. The next morning was colder than I expected. I pulled on an extra sweatshirt and got the wood stove going using some chopped logs stacked near the door. It took some practice, but soon enough I had a good fire crackling, taking the chill off the room. I spent the day exploring a little. There was a narrow trail behind the cabin that led down to a shallow stream about a half-mile away. I filled up a couple of water jugs there just in case the pump froze or failed. Most of the days passed like that at first. Reading on the porch, taking long walks through the forest, gathering wood, cooking simple meals, staring at the fire. I felt better than I had in months. The stress and noise in my head quieted down. I started sleeping deeper, my muscles aching in a good way from the hikes and the work. But by the 4th night, small things started gnawing at me. It was little stuff at first. I'd stack the firewood neatly by the door and come back from a walk to find a couple of pieces lying several feet away, like they'd been kicked or tossed. I chalked it up to wind or maybe squirrels getting into it. One morning, I woke up to find muddy footprints near the porch steps. They were boot prints, not animal tracks. For a second, I thought maybe I'd walked there myself and forgotten, but the more I looked, the more I realized they weren't mine. They were smaller than my boots, and the tread was different. They circled the cabin once and disappeared back into the woods. It unsettled me, but I tried not to freak out. I told myself it could have been a local hunter passing through. Maybe he'd seen smoke from the chimney and decided to check it out, figured someone was staying there, and left. Nothing had been stolen or broken. The door was still locked. That evening, I double-checked the door and windows before going to bed. I kept the shotgun within reach, loaded and safety on. I lay there for a long time, listening to every groan of the cabin settling, every gust of wind against the walls. I finally drifted off around midnight. Sometime deep in the night, I woke up suddenly. No clear reason, just that feeling you get sometimes that something's wrong. The fire had burned down to embers. The cabin was cold and dark. I lay there frozen for a minute, straining my ears. There was a faint sound coming from outside. At first, I thought it was the wind again, but the longer I listened, the more certain I became it was footsteps. Light, careful steps, circling the cabin slowly. Every so often they'd stop, then start again. I sat up slowly, heart hammering so loud I was sure whoever it was could hear it. I grabbed the shotgun and crept toward the window. I couldn't see much, just the faint outlines of trees and the clearing under the weak moonlight. But I caught a quick glimpse of a figure slipping between the trees. Not close enough to see details, just a shape. It was definitely a person. Not an animal, not a shadow. Someone was out there. I stayed awake the rest of the night, sitting by the stove with the shotgun across my lap, staring at the door. Whoever it was never tried to come inside. By morning, when the gray light started seeping through the windows, I felt half crazy from lack of sleep and nerves. I spent that whole day pacing around the cabin, trying to decide what to do. I could pack up and leave, but part of me was furious. This was supposed to be my time to rest, and now some jackass was trying to scare me off. I decided to stay one more night. If anything else happened, I'd leave in the morning. I made sure everything was locked down tight, kept the shotgun close, and even rigged a little noise trap by hanging a few old tin cans from a string across the porch. If anyone stepped onto it, I'd hear it. Night came down like a hammer. No stars, just thick clouds rolling in. The air felt heavy, like it was about to storm. I sat inside with the lights off, listening. Hours passed with nothing. No footsteps, no noises. I started to relax a little, thinking maybe whoever it was had moved on. Around 2 a.m., the cans clattered. I jumped up so fast I knocked over the chair. I grabbed the shotgun and rushed to the window. I couldn't see anything through the glass, so I eased the door open a crack and peered out. The porch was empty. The cans were swinging slowly in the wind. I stepped out, keeping low. The woods beyond the clearing were just blackness. I thought about firing a warning shot, but I didn't want to give away my exact location. Suddenly, from the trees to my left, I heard a loud snapping sound, like someone stepping hard on a branch. I turned and raised the shotgun, heart hammering so hard I could barely think. I didn't see anything. No movement, no shapes, just endless dark trees. I backed up into the cabin, locked the door, and stayed up the rest of the night again. By the time the first light crept in, I had made up my mind. I was leaving. I packed my bag quickly, shoved everything into the back of the Escape, and got the hell out of there. I kept checking the rearview mirror the whole drive down the dirt road, half expecting to see someone following me. I didn't stop until I hit the main road, and even then, I kept going another 50 miles south before pulling into a gas station. While I filled up, I noticed something on the side of the car, deep scratches running along the passenger side doors. For long, uneven gouges, like someone had dragged a sharp piece of metal across them. I hadn't noticed them before. I sure as hell hadn't hit anything driving out. That was the last straw. I didn't report anything. What could I even say? Someone crept around my cabin and scared me? It wasn't illegal to walk through the woods. I just wanted to get home and forget about the whole thing. In the weeks after, I kept thinking about it, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was just some local trying to spook the city boy out of their woods. Maybe it was a hunter who stumbled on the cabin and decided to have a little fun. Or maybe it was something worse. Someone who was sizing me up, waiting for the right night to do more than just creep around outside. I didn't know. And honestly, I didn't want to know. One thing was for sure, I never went back. I never even looked at cabins online again. The woods, the silence, the isolation, all the things I thought I needed, turned into the most terrifying experience of my life. It made me realize something important though. Peace and quiet are good, but complete isolation, that's something else entirely. It strips you down, leaves you raw and exposed in ways you don't expect. You realize just how small you really are, and how easy it is for you to vanish without anyone even knowing you were there. From then on, I stuck to campgrounds, places with other people around. It was late September of 2019 when I decided to take a break from everything. I had just turned 34, and life felt like it was dragging me under. Work, bills, expectations, it all piled up heavier every year. I needed to get away for a while, somewhere quiet where my phone wouldn't buzz every few minutes, where no one could expect anything from me. I lived in southern Ohio at the time, near Cincinnati, and after searching around a bit online, I found a place called Hollow Pines Reserve. It was a huge forested area up near the border with Kentucky, mostly untouched except for a few rental cabins spread across the eastern edge of it. The website was plain and looked kind of dated, but the price was cheap, and the pictures showed old wooden cabins tucked into the trees, with little fire pits out front and hiking trails winding behind them. Sounded perfect. I packed up my beat-up Ford Explorer with a few basics: sleeping bag, cooler full of drinks and sandwiches, flashlight, matches, a couple of old paperbacks I never got around to reading. I wasn't planning anything fancy. I just wanted quiet. I didn't even bring a laptop or anything to work on. I left early Friday morning, hoping to beat traffic. The GPS said it would take about 3 hours to get there. The drive was easy at first, mostly wide highways surrounded by endless fields. I blasted some old music and let the wind roll through the windows. After a couple hours, the roads narrowed and the houses got farther apart. Gas stations turned into little rundown shacks, and the signs pointing toward Hollow Pines looked older and more weathered. After another hour, I turned off onto a cracked 2-lane road that twisted deep into the trees. The GPS lost signal not long after that, but I wasn't worried. According to the directions I'd printed out, just in case, the cabin wasn't much farther. I missed the turn without realizing it. The sign for Cabin Loop A was half fallen over and covered in vines, and I cruised right past it. I kept driving, thinking it was just around the next bend, but the trees kept getting thicker and the road rougher. After another 20 minutes, I realized I was lost. I figured I'd just turn around at the next wide spot and backtrack, but there weren't any. It was nothing but narrow road hugging sharp drop-offs and thick, dark woods. Eventually, the road widened into what looked like a long-forgotten parking area. Cracked asphalt, weeds pushing through the cracks, an old rusted-out sign that was too faded to read. I pulled over and checked my phone. No signal, of course. I sat there for a minute, engine idling, trying to decide if I should keep going or turn back. That's when I spotted something through the trees. There was a cabin, about 50 yards off the road, just barely visible between the pines. It looked abandoned, sagging roof, missing chunks of siding, windows dark and empty. But beside it was a much smaller building that looked newer, maybe a little shed or something. It was weird to find them out here, but they didn't look completely destroyed. Maybe someone lived out here off the grid. Maybe it was just old hunting property. I figured it wouldn't hurt to check it out, maybe ask for directions if anybody was around. I parked the Explorer off to the side and grabbed my flashlight, even though it was still early afternoon. The trees were so thick that the light barely filtered down. I locked the doors behind me out of habit and started walking toward the cabin. The closer I got, the more rundown it looked. The front steps were half rotted, and the front door hung slightly open, swaying in the breeze. The whole place smelled like damp wood and mildew. I called out a hello but got nothing back, just the soft rustle of leaves. Still, something about the cabin pulled at me. I kept moving forward, stepping carefully onto the front porch, boards creaking under my weight. Inside, the place was stripped bare. No furniture, no decorations. Just a dusty old fireplace on one side and a cracked sink against the far wall. Patches of old wallpaper peeled away from the walls, and dead insects littered the floor. It didn't look like anybody had lived here in years. I was about to turn back when I noticed the hatch. It was a small square cut into the floor, maybe 3 feet wide, near the fireplace. The handle was old and rusty, but it looked like it had been used recently. The dust around it was disturbed, footprints leading to and from it. I stared at it for a long time, my heart picking up speed. It made no sense. Why would there be a hatch in the middle of an empty, forgotten cabin? Curiosity wrestled with caution in my mind. I told myself I'd just take a quick look, then leave. The hatch creaked loudly as I pulled it open. It revealed a short, narrow set of wooden steps descending into pitch blackness. I shined my flashlight down but couldn't see much, just dirt walls and a rough floor. It didn't even look finished, more like a shallow root cellar. I hesitated at the top of the stairs, feeling that prickling sensation at the back of my neck, that ancient animal part of my brain screaming at me to leave. I ignored it. I carefully descended the steps, one hand gripping the flashlight, the other on the rail, if you could even call it that, just a rough beam nailed to the wall. The basement, or whatever it was, smelled worse than the cabin. Damp, rotting earth, sour mold. The beam from my flashlight shook a little in my hand. There wasn't much down there. A few old wooden crates stacked in one corner, an empty metal drum tipped on its side. In the farthest corner, something caught my light. It was a trapdoor, another one. This one was metal, bolted into the floor with heavy iron hinges. I walked toward it, drawn by something I couldn't explain. There were deep scratches in the dirt all around it, as if something or someone had tried to pry it open from below. I stood there for a long time, staring at it, feeling the heavy weight of the earth pressing down all around me. The silence was complete, broken only by the faint thudding of my heart in my ears. I had no reason to be there, no reason at all. I finally turned and climbed back up the stairs, shutting the hatch firmly behind me. I hurried out of the cabin and back toward my truck. It was getting late. The light was fading fast, and the temperature was dropping. The idea of spending the night anywhere near that cabin made my skin crawl. I got into the Explorer and turned the key. Nothing. The engine didn't even try to turn over. Just a single, sad clicking sound. I tried again, harder this time, pumping the gas. Nothing. I popped the hood and got out, hoping maybe a cable had just shaken loose on the rough road. I propped the hood open and stared at the engine, but I didn't know much about cars. Everything looked fine to me. I slammed the hood shut and leaned against the truck, feeling panic start to rise. No cell service, no running vehicle, no idea where I even was. I told myself I'd just stay in the truck overnight, lock the doors, hunker down, wait for daylight. Then I'd walk back to the main road and flag somebody down. It wasn't ideal, but it wasn't the end of the world. I got back in the truck, locked the doors, and tried to settle in. It got dark fast. The woods swallowed the last of the daylight, and without any moon yet, it was black as pitch outside. I couldn't even see the cabin anymore. I turned the flashlight on and set it in the cup holder, angling it upward so it lit the inside of the truck a little. I cracked a sandwich out of the cooler but barely ate it. My stomach was knotted too tight. I tried to sleep, but every little noise outside snapped me awake. The creaking of trees, the rustling of leaves. Once I heard what sounded like slow, heavy footsteps crunching through the underbrush. I sat up, heart hammering, straining to see anything through the windows, but it was just too dark. The footsteps stopped eventually, and silence returned. At some point, exhaustion won out. I drifted into an uneasy, shallow sleep. I woke up sometime later, freezing cold. The flashlight had died, plunging the inside of the truck into darkness. My breath fogged the windows. It was dead silent outside. No wind, no animals, not even a distant owl. That thick, oppressive silence that feels unnatural. I tried the key again out of habit. Same dead click. I decided then that I wasn't going to wait until morning. I couldn't stand being trapped in that truck all night. I grabbed my flashlight and opened the door. The cold hit me like a wall. I zipped up my jacket and started walking back the way I thought I'd come, following the broken road, the flashlight's weak beam dancing over the ground. I hadn't gone 100 yards when I saw it. In the beam of my flashlight, up ahead, something was lying across the road. I thought at first it was a log or a big branch that had fallen. But as I got closer, I realized it was a deer, at least what was left of one. It was gutted, sprawled across the road, blood soaking into the cracked asphalt. Its body was twisted unnaturally, legs bent at impossible angles. It hadn't been there earlier. I was sure of it. I backed up instinctively, heart hammering against my ribs. I swept the flashlight around, but the woods were just endless walls of black. There was a snap somewhere off to my right, a loud, deliberate sound, like a branch breaking underfoot. I bolted. I was 29 when I made the worst mistake of my life. It was October 2022, and I had just gotten out of a messy breakup. I was working as a project manager at a construction company back then in northern Michigan, in a small city called Traverse Hills. I had a decent salary, no kids, and a few weeks of saved up vacation time. After everything that happened, I just needed to get away. I didn't want beaches, didn't want crowded hotels, didn't want to see people at all. I just wanted quiet, space, and to be completely alone for a while. I decided to rent a small, isolated cabin deep in the woods of the Upper Peninsula, about 3.5 hours north of where I lived. It wasn't the kind of cabin you find on popular rental sites either. I found it through a sketchy-looking website full of blurry photos and listings that didn't even have reviews. I didn't really care though. I just wanted somewhere cheap and private. The listing said the place was a 15-minute drive down a private dirt road, off a county highway, sitting on 10 acres of thick woods, no neighbors anywhere nearby, no Wi-Fi, no cell service. The pictures showed a little weathered cabin, one floor, a tiny porch, and an old wood stove inside. That was all I needed. The owner, some older guy named Bill, emailed me back after a day or two. He said I could stay there for $100 a night, cash only, and he gave me a bunch of basic instructions. Bring my own food, water, bedding, flashlight, firewood, and be sure to lock the gate behind me when I came in. He warned me the cabin hadn't been used in a while, but it was dry and clean. I packed up my old Tacoma with gear, a sleeping bag, extra blankets, food for a week, a big cooler full of ice, firewood, lanterns, batteries, a hunting knife I didn't even know how to use, and a Glock 19 that I kept hidden under my driver's seat. I wasn't expecting trouble, but you never know when you're that far out. It was already cold up north in October. Leaves had mostly fallen. Bare branches reached up into the gray sky like twisted black fingers. The farther north I drove, the fewer cars I saw. By the time I got close to the turnoff Bill had given me, I hadn't passed another car in almost 20 minutes. The county highway was cracked and patchy, with little two-lane stretches that dipped through thick stands of pine and maple. My tires kicked up loose gravel when I finally turned onto the dirt road. That road was bad. Deep ruts, puddles full of brown rainwater, fallen branches everywhere. I had to crawl along at maybe 10 miles an hour just to keep from getting stuck. Trees pressed in so close on either side it felt like driving into a tunnel. About a mile in, I reached the gate Bill had mentioned, a rusted metal bar chained between two old fence posts, barely standing. I stopped, unlocked it with the key he'd mailed me, swung it open, and drove through. I locked it back behind me just like he said. Then I kept going. The cabin finally came into view after another 10 minutes of slow, bouncing driving. It looked even rougher than the photos. The wood siding was sun-bleached and cracked. The little porch sagged. One shutter hung at an angle barely attached. The windows were dusty but unbroken. A little chimney stuck out of the slanted roof, smoke stains blackening the boards around it. I parked about 20 feet from the front door and killed the engine. For a second, the silence was absolute. No traffic, no voices, no wind. Just me, my truck, and endless, dead-looking woods all around. It was unsettling, but also kind of what I came for. I unloaded everything, tossing it onto the porch. When I finally found the key for the front door and opened it, I was hit with that old cabin smell, with smoke, dust, and a little bit of mustiness. Inside, the cabin was just 4 rooms, a main living area with a battered old couch, a wood stove, and a tiny kitchen nook with a sink and a propane stove. A small bathroom with no running water, a cramped bedroom with a rickety bed frame, and a closet that smelled like old, wet towels. I spent the next hour setting up. I spread my sleeping bag on the bed, lit a couple lanterns, stacked firewood inside by the stove, and made a quick, cold sandwich. After eating, I sat outside on the porch, drinking a beer, staring at the woods. The air smelled sharp and earthy, almost metallic. The trees were so dense it felt like walls pressing in. Every once in a while, A crow croaked out in the distance, but otherwise nothing moved. By sunset, it was getting cold. I built a fire in the wood stove, which took forever because the wood was a little damp, but I finally got a decent blaze going. I bundled up in my jacket and sat close to the stove, reading an old paperback I'd brought. I figured I'd stay up late, sleep in, and spend the next few days hiking, writing in my journal, and just clearing my head. That first night was quiet, except for the noises you'd expect. The stove creaked. The woods outside made little crackling sounds as things shifted. Once, I heard something heavy thud onto the porch, maybe a branch falling, but when I peeked outside with a flashlight, nothing was there. The second day started fine. I made some instant coffee, went for a walk along the dirt road, took a bunch of pictures of the trees and mossy rocks. The woods were beautiful in a lonely, bleak way, but around mid-afternoon, something happened that made me uneasy. I was maybe a mile from the cabin, just wandering through the trees, when I saw it. A clearing I hadn't noticed before. It was perfectly circular, like someone had cleared it on purpose, but there was nothing there. No cabin, no fire pit, no sign anyone had camped there. Just dead grass and a few broken branches. And at the center of the clearing, a single wooden post stuck out of the ground, about chest high, with what looked like deep scratch marks gouged into it. It was weird, felt wrong. I don't know why. There wasn't anything obviously scary about it, but my gut twisted. I didn't even want to get close enough to touch the post. I just backed away, turned around, and headed straight back to the cabin. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling someone was watching me. I kept thinking about that post, about the way the clearing felt too empty. I tried to read again, but couldn't focus. I ended up building the fire bigger than I needed to, keeping the cabin extra warm, because for some reason I wanted as much light as possible. At some point past midnight, I woke up to the sound of my truck alarm blaring. I shot up out of the bed, heart hammering so hard I felt dizzy. I grabbed my flashlight and my Glock, slipped on my boots, and stumbled out the front door into the freezing air. The truck lights were flashing wildly. The alarm was screaming. I ran to it, fumbling with the keys, and finally shut it off. I stood there in the dark, panting, listening. The woods were absolutely still. I circled the truck with my flashlight, checking for damage. No broken windows, no scratches, nothing. I popped the hood, wondering if some animal had gotten underneath, but I didn't see any sign of that either. I eventually went back inside, locked the door, and sat by the stove with the gun in my lap for hours, too wired to sleep. The next morning, I decided to drive into town, any town, just to clear my head. I needed coffee, needed people around me for a few hours. I packed a day bag, got in the truck, turned the key, and nothing happened. The engine didn't even try to turn over, just a faint clicking sound. I checked the battery connections. Fine, no corrosion. I checked the fuse box. Nothing obvious. I didn't know a lot about trucks, but something wasn't right, and I had no cell service to call for help. I sat there for a long time trying to decide what to do. I could hike out, but the nearest main road was probably 10 miles away, and even then, it might be hours before a car passed. Plus, it was cold, and I didn't exactly have great hiking boots. I decided to stay one more night, then in the morning, pack light and walk out. That day crawled by. Every little sound outside set me on edge. I kept thinking I heard faint footsteps crunching in the leaves, but when I looked, there was nothing. Once, I thought I saw movement through the trees, a flash of gray or brown, but it was gone so fast I wasn't sure I hadn't imagined it. By sundown, the anxiety was so bad I had the Glock sitting next to me at all times. I barely ate. I just sat by the fire, listening, waiting. That night was the worst. Around 2 in the morning, I heard it, clear as anything. Heavy footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate, boards creaking under the weight. My heart jumped into my throat. I grabbed the gun, turned off the lantern, crouched by the wood stove, listening. The footsteps moved to the door. I could hear breathing, deep, slow breaths, right on the other side. I didn't move. I didn't make a sound. The doorknob rattled just once. Then silence. I stayed there frozen for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Eventually, I heard the footsteps move away, creaking down the porch steps. I didn't dare turn on a light. I didn't dare look outside. I just sat there until dawn. When the first gray light seeped through the windows, I finally packed everything I could